The opinions expressed on this program are solely those of its hosts, guests, or callers, and do not necessarily represent the opinions of WTBR-FM, its management, other producers, or sponsors.
You're listening to And So It Flows, your only show for H2O. Super psyched to be with you today. I'm your super waterman, ambassador for water. Bringing you water consciousness from the Berkshires. Here at 89.7 WTBR-FM. Pittsfield Community Radio. And via podcast all around the world. Your home for water consciousness here at WTBR-FM, Pittsfield Community Radio. I'm your super waterman, super psyched. We got Matthew Hoh here with us, former State Department official, former Iraq and Afghanistan war veteran, Marine, and we'll be having a conversation today about something that happened in the water a couple of years ago, the Nord Stream Pipeline, one of the biggest releases of methane gas ever, and some news around that, so stay tuned for the second half of the show. Super psyched about that. There's everything touches water, even war and peace, and it's time to have that conversation. And it's great that it's happening from Pittsfield, Massachusetts, in the heart of the Berkshires, where water is super important to us, and water is the message. Again, you're listening to And So It Flows, your only show for H2O. We got some music coming your way, and this is one, since we're going to be talking about Nord Stream Pipeline today. This is a really famous anti-war activist, singer, and it's the one and only Pete Seeger, wringing out his waist deep in the Big Muddy. This is a live performance. Thanks so much for being with us. And tune on into your H2O.
It was back in 1942. I was a member of a good platoon. We were on maneuvers in Louisiana one night by the light of the moon. The captain told us to ford a river. That's how it all begun. We were knee-deep in the Big Muddy. The big fool says to push on. The sergeant said, "Sir, are you sure this is the best way back to the base?" "Sergeant, go on, I forded this river about a mile above this place. It'll be a little soggy, but just keep slogging, we'll soon be on dry ground." We were waist deep in the Big Muddy. The big fool says to push on. Well, the sergeant said, "Sir, with all this equipment, no man'll be able to swim." "Sergeant, don't be a nervous Nelly," the captain said to him. "All we need is a little determination, men, follow me, I'll lead on." We were neck deep in the Big Muddy. The big fool says to push on. All at once, the moon clouded over, we heard a gurgling cry. A few seconds later, the captain's helmet was all that floated by. The sergeant said, "Turn around, men, I'm in charge from now on." And we just made it out of the Big Muddy with the captain dead and gone. We stripped and dived and found his body stuck in the old quicksand. I guess he didn't know that the water was deeper than the place he'd once before been. Another stream had joined the Big Muddy about a half-mile from where we'd gone. We were lucky to escape from the Big Muddy when the big fool said to push on. Well, I'm not going to point anymore, I'll leave that for yourself. Maybe you're still walking, you're still talking, you'd like to keep your health. But every time I read the paper, them old feelings come on. We're waist deep in the Big Muddy, the big fool says to push on. Waist deep in the Big Muddy, the big fool says to push on. Waist deep in the Big Muddy, the big fool says to push on. Waist deep, neck deep, soon even a tall man will be over his head. We're waist deep in the Big Muddy, the big fool says to push on.
In my eyes, indisposed, in disguises no one knows. Hides the face, lies the snake in the sun. In my disgrace, boiling heat, summer stench. Neath the black, the sky looks dead. Call my name through black hole sun, won't you come, wash away the rain. Black hole sun, won't you come, won't you come, won't you come. Stuttering, cold and damp, steal the warm wind, tired friend. Gone for honest men, sometimes far too long for snakes. In my shoes, walking sleep. In my youth, I pray to keep heaven send hell away. No one seems like you anymore. Black hole sun, won't you come, wash away the rain. Black hole sun, won't you come, won't you come. Black hole sun, won't you come, wash away the rain. Black hole sun, won't you come, won't you come. Won't you come. Won't you come. Won't you come. Hang my head, drown my fear, till you all just disappear. Black hole sun, won't you come, wash away the rain. Black hole sun, won't you come, won't you come.
and so it flows, your only show for H2O. I am your super waterman, ambassador for water. Super psyched that you're with us. We're here at 89.7 WTBR-FM, Pittsfield Community Radio. This week we started off our show with the Big Muddy, good old song by Pete Seeger, rest his activist and singing soul. This was off the Waist Deep in the Big Money album, and it's actually a song of hubris and a song of really not getting what actually works and what doesn't work. And it was around the time of the good old Vietnam War, and it still holds true today as we go push the limits of what other people want to do, and poking them and seeing if they're going to respond. But guess what? They are responding. And then we have Black Hole Sun, which is by Soundgarden from the Super Unknown Deluxe Edition album. And that is a song that kind of speaks for itself. A black hole sun. It's like a space which is dark and it rains and you're not sure what's going on. And it's, it's kind of like a space where our humanity is currently in, which is an unknown space, a space of the untested, unwritten future. So it's really great to be with you, to bring you water consciousness from the cultural capital of the Northeast, the Berkshire Mountain region of Massachusetts, Western Massachusetts. Pretty soon we're going to have friend of show with us, Matthew Hoh, former United States Marine captain, former State Department official that actually quit in protest of what was going on in Afghanistan. He also was an Iraq War veteran. He's turned into somewhat of a diplomacy advocate, working with the Eisenhower Media Network, and he's a friend of the show. So super psyched that he's going to be with us today, so stay tuned for that. We got a little bit of news coming your way, some H2O news. Let's see what's up. This is from the Voice of America. Some call it propaganda, but it's an interesting story how Germany is proceeding cautiously and issuing a warrant for Ukrainian national regarding the 2022 Nord Stream sabotage.
The German Federal Prosecutor's Office has issued an arrest warrant against a Ukrainian national in its investigation into the sabotage of Nord Stream gas pipelines in 2022. It's a potential accusation that Germany's governing coalition wants to treat with great caution. The reason? Investigators are not entirely sure who is to blame.
Nobody knows exactly who it was right now. And it seems that three Ukrainian citizens are behind that attack on German property. But there's no relation until now. There's no proof, no connection to the Ukrainian government.
The Wall Street Journal, citing anonymous sources in an exclusive on Wednesday, reported the plan was initially approved by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, but that he withdrew his approval before others in his government went ahead with it. The cutoff of Russian gas to Germany caused a drastic rise in energy prices, and with it, inflation throughout Europe and much of the world. The attack, blamed by the Journal on Ukrainian divers, damaged but did not destroy the Nord Stream 1 pipeline, and experts say it could go back into service. It also damaged the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, whose entry into service was halted before Russia invaded Ukraine.
There is one strand of that pipeline, 1 out of 4, that's still intact. Apparently, the divers placed 2 charges on one of the strands, one of the lanes. So there were 4 blasts, but looks like 2 of them were on the same line.
It's unlikely Germany would return to massive consumption of Russian gas, even if Kyiv and Moscow came to a peace agreement. Analysts tell VOA that since the attack, Germany has developed an alternative energy model that is more sustainable, but also more expensive.
Germany is doing an energy transition towards more renewable energy. The share of renewable energy on the electricity production is now already approximately 57%.
On the streets of Moscow, the news of Kyiv's possible involvement in the Nord Stream attack competes with that of Ukraine's advance into the Russian region of Kursk. Some see the move less as a show of might by what many thought was the weaker side, and more of a fight for control of an important economic resource in Kursk.
The entry of the enemy's armed forces into the Kursk territory raises serious concerns for the Russian authorities, since the battle is not being fought for Kursk, but for control of the gas transportation system.
Russia's war in Ukraine has already shown that its impact reaches well beyond the battlefield and into the global economy and energy sector. For Ricardo Marquina in Berlin, Elizabeth Cherna, VOA News.
You're listening to And So It Flows, your only show for H2O. A little bit of news from Voice of America. Thank you very much, Voice of America, for providing a little bit of insight on what's going on currently. There's some talk about folks in Poland who are participating in having helped some Ukrainian nationals. All of this obviously has to be uncovered and looked at. So all of this, might be a deflection and it might be real. So let's keep paying attention to what's going on. We're going to ask a couple of questions of Matthew Hoh when he comes on in a couple of minutes of what's going on currently, as well as what happened with the Nord Stream pipeline. And you're listening to And So It Flows, your only show for H2O. A little bit from Nelson Mandela. Let there be justice for all. Let there be peace for all. Let there be work, bread, water, and salt for all. Let each know that the body, the mind, and the soul have been freed to fulfill themselves. Nelson Mandela, that was from his inaugural speech delivered on 10th of May, 1994 in Pretoria, South Africa. And next up, a little bit of music. This is from Lord with Oceanic Feeling.
It's a blue day. We could jump bully. When I hit that water, when it holds me, I think about my father doing the same thing when he was a boy. When he was a boy. It's a blue day. We could go fishing. You'll catch the big one. Sliding the knife under the skin. Grateful for this offering. And all the living things under the sun. Under the sun. Little brother, I think you're an angel. See your silver chain levitate when you're kick flipping. Baby boy, you're super cool. I know you're scared, so was I. But all will be revealed in time. Oh look, the waves are in the bay now. Can you hear the waves and the cicadas all around? I can make anything real. Rain so hot, it's a summer party. Every day is blue and never cloudy. Don't look down. I can make anything with you true. If I have a daughter, will she have my waist or my widow's speak? My demon's disposition or my wicked sleep? Will she split a tab with her lover? Laugh at the stars like a mother? When she was a girl, when she was a girl. Now the cherry black lipsticks gathering dust in a drawer. I don't need her anymore, 'cause I got this power. Just had to breathe and tune in. I just had to breathe out, breathe out, breathe out, breathe out. And tune in, tune in, tune in, tune in. I just had to breathe. And tune in. I just had to breathe. Enlightenment found. No, but I'm trying, taking it 1 year at a time. How can you hear the sound? It's shimmering higher on the beach. I'm building up high.
Here's the wood brought in by the tide.
I know you show me how. I know when it's time to take off my robes and step into the choir.
You're listening to And So It Flows, your only show for H2O. That was Lorde singing Oceanic Feeling from her Solar Power album. Super psyched to be with you. Next up, we're going to have Matthew Hoh as he walks into the studio, you know, and smiles, and friend of show, former Marine, former State Department official who resigned in protest, as a lot of State Department officials are resigning in protest right now due to some other policies. He resigned in protest over the Afghanistan policy and overall war on terrorism. He had an insight. And today he's going to share some insights on the Nord Stream Pipeline. So psyched to have him here with us. So let's just go bring him on. And 1 second on that. So we do that here. A little technical stuff. Always fun. Always great to have you here, Matthew.
Hello, this is Leslie, your Super Waterman Ambassador for Water. We're here at WTBR-FM, 89.7 on your FM dial here at Pittsfield Community Radio. You're listening to And So It Flows, your only show for H2O, and I'm super excited to have with us today Matthew Hoh. Matthew, many people actually know, is an associate director of the Eisenhower Media Network. He's a former Marine Corps captain, an Afghanistan State Department officer, a disabled Iraq War veteran, and a senior fellow emeritus with the Center for International Policy. And we're going to have a conversation right now about the Nord Stream pipeline, which happened to have happened in the water. So Matthew, why don't you share a little bit about who you are, or some extended version of that biography with our water-loving listeners around the world?
Thanks, Leslie, and thanks for having me back on.
You're welcome.
As the bio says, I'm a former Marine officer. I was in the Iraq War, in the Afghan War, with the State Department as well. I, since 2009, have been working for peace, working for diplomacy rather than war, working against, our militarized foreign policy and our, gargantuan defense budgets. And for me, why I like being here with you is because you see such a relationship between war and the environment. And unfortunately, it's a terrible, terrible, awful relationship. The biggest institutional polluter in the world is US Department of Defense. When I was on with you last time, we spoke about the impact on the war in Iraq, on the water in Iraq, on the environment in Iraq, and of course then what that means for the people of Iraq, the land. And certainly we could happy to come back. We could talk about its impact on the climate. But yeah, really pleased to be here with you today to talk about this one very localized event that had enormous environmental impacts, just as it had enormous political and economic consequences.
Yeah, a little bit about what I know about the Nord Stream pipeline is the big news was on September 26, 2022, news broke of 4 explosions at the Nord Stream number 1 and number 2 natural gas pipelines, rendering 3 of the 4 lines inoperable. 3 separate investigations were started by Germany, Sweden, and Denmark. And some news of that is starting to break about who's responsible. The latter 2 were closed without publicly assigning responsibility for the damage in February 2024. And the German authorities issued an arrest warrant for a Ukrainian national who is named Voldemort Z. Sounds like something from Harry Potter. So, from your best knowledge, tell people about what happened? Do you have any insight into what happened?
Well, the pipeline was deliberately destroyed. Someone went down there with explosive charges and tried to destroy all 4 pipelines. There's 2 pipelines for Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines for Nord Stream 2. 3 of the 4 were destroyed. This all goes back many numbers of years. This gets into the politics and the economics of energy. This is a chief reason behind the war in Ukraine, this idea of who's going to control the energy market of Europe. The Russians, of course, as people know, the Russians are, in terms of commodities, if anything comes out of the ground that you can sell, the Russians have it. If you look at the list of commodities, anything, the Russians are like the top 3 in the world for it. And that, of course, includes fossil fuels, natural gas. And they built this pipeline. They started construction, I think, around 2011 or so, 2010. Been about 15 years or so. And the idea was that this pipeline was going to deliver gas directly to Germany and Western Europe, bypassing Ukraine and Poland, the Baltic states, right? Because those are politically contentious areas. There's tension there. Of course, you have the what occurs in 2014 in Ukraine, the coup. You have the taking of Crimea by Russia. I mean, so you can understand why the Russians would want to put their pipelines someplace other than through these land areas. Now, just to caveat that, they still have pipelines going through Ukraine, and even 2.5 years after their invasion, the pipelines are still passing gas to Central and Western Europe because, at the end of the day, even if you're killing each other, you're still going to make a buck, right? I mean, so, people have to keep that in mind in terms of the dollar, the profit involved in all of this. But the idea with Nord Stream was exactly that. Bypass Eastern Europe, deliver the gas directly to Germany, and then it would go on to Western Europe from there. It was a joint program. The Russians were involved, the Germans were involved, of course, the French, the Dutch, and it was Nord Stream 1 was delivering 40% of the natural gas that Western Europe was using. So it's so successful, the Russians say, we're going to build Nord Stream 2, right? And this then becomes a big issue, particularly here in the U.S. Sanctions are put onto Russia during the Trump presidency. The sanctions are threatened against the Germans, the French. That if you go along with this, we are gonna use what's called unilateral economic coercive measures against you to dissuade you. If people remember, Donald Trump gets into a big fight with the Chancellor of Germany, Angela Merkel, over this, right? This idea that Germany's going along with this Nord Stream project. So fast forward, of course, Russia invades Russia invades Ukraine in February 2022. In August of 2022, the Russians turn off Nord Stream 1. So for the first 6 months of the invasion, they're still pumping this gas to Western Europe. August, they turn it off. They say, hey, you're sanctioning us. We're going to sanction you back. No more gas. This, of course, creates a tremendous energy crisis in Western Europe, if people remember, and a huge driver of inflation. What happens then in September, the following month, are these explosions that you talked about. And so someone went down about 80 meters below the surface, destroyed the pipelines, massive environmental consequences, huge political shell out, huge political costs as well. Changes the Ukraine war as well, whereas Russia, you would hear about Russia hitting their airstrikes, their missile strikes in the first 6 months of the war were really limited to military infrastructure. Their stuff would go off course and hit civilian things, of course, from time to time. But what happens after the Nord Stream explosion is Russia starts attacking Ukraine's energy infrastructure. And they really start going after their ports, right? So this becomes now an economic war in terms of what they're targeting. And that's a consequence of these explosions. Ridiculously, the West says Russia blew up their own pipelines, makes no sense. And the Russians all along say it's the West that did this. As you said, multiple nations launched investigations. Earlier this year, both Denmark and Sweden, because the pipeline crossed through their territory, their sea territory, dropped their investigations. Germany continued their investigation. And just this past week, they issued an arrest warrant for a Ukrainian diver who had been living in Poland, but he fled back to Ukraine, and so probably never going to see this guy. But this is where most people believe the story lays, is that the Ukrainians sent out a team of divers. They went down 80 meters. They had the equipment they needed to do it. The Germans believe they know what boat it was. It's a sailboat, which most people scoff at, but maybe it's possible to do it off a sailboat. I don't know. And, so here we are 2 years later after the explosions with a better idea of what happened, but the consequences still in terms of the war, but then the environmental consequences as well, are still with us. Are you muted?
Okay, so yeah, little technical stuff on podcast. So, one of the things that, like, for folks to actually get is, like, you spoke about the environment, is from my understanding, it was the largest methane release ever.
Right.
Which is a global warming gas.
Yeah.
So where have, in your understanding, where do you think our environmental leaders have been, our activists, screaming or protesting or to cause some commotion about, moving away from this kind of modern warfare, or making some, movement towards, can we actually all agree that this doesn't work for the whole climate warming conversation, when environmentalists can mute because they want to be on the right side of whatever progressive perspective around supporting Ukraine.
So like, as you said, it was the largest release of methane gas in history. It killed all sea life within 3 or 4 miles of the explosion. Wow. And within about 30 or 40 miles of the explosion, all the sea life had their hearing damage. So you can imagine those animals that ultimately, those fish, I should say, ultimately starved to death. It kicked up, the explosion kicked up the soil, the seabed. And that caused all kinds of contamination, because there's so many chemicals that have settled down in the seabed. So you had a mass contamination of the sea area. So really, in terms of the local effects, this was absolutely catastrophic.
Like a dead zone.
Like a dead zone, essentially, yes, a dead zone. What you said is, okay, where's the outcry? Why aren't people saying this is madness, you have to stop this? And it's because, for the most part, our environmental groups, our environmental leaders are cowed by, they're threatened by, they're afraid to confront the military political establishment. You see this during the climate change talks, where every year we have the COP process in a different nation, and they put forward what they're going to do to reduce climate change. And always the military is excluded from climate change. In terms of, we talked last about the effects on the environment in Iraq from the U.S. invasion and occupation. You have to search high and low to find environmental groups in the United States that talk about this. And it's the same in the Ukraine war. The environmental destruction of the Ukraine war is, it's incalculable. What the true cost of this is going to be, in terms of the destruction of the land, the air, the water in Ukraine. It will be orders of magnitude worse than anything we have seen. So whether you're talking about what the environmental consequences to, say, Southeast Asia was following the wars there, the environmental consequences to, say, Afghanistan, particularly the Soviets, what the Soviets did in Afghanistan, what we did in Iraq. Ukraine is going to be orders of magnitude beyond that, because of the aspects of modern warfare. Just when a tank is destroyed, the metals, the chemicals that leach into the ground from that. Imagine this massive leaching of these pollutants into the ground. That's just one example. They're firing depleted uranium rounds over there. The destruction and the long-term consequences, again, are hard to know, because we've not seen anything like this. But we can understand that this land, this water, and this air will be unfriendly to life for decades to come. And you will have the same things that have happened to those in Southeast Asia following the wars there, to the Iraqis, the cancer rates, and of course the most horrible aspect of this realization that generations from now, Ukrainian mothers and Russian mothers, because this doesn't, as we know, these types of environmental costs don't respect political boundaries, Russian mothers as well will, 10, 20, 30 years from now, maybe longer. It's the case in Vietnam, more than 50, 60 years. Vietnamese mothers are still giving birth to children that are deformed, disabled, dead because of the toxic legacy of the Vietnam War. We can be assured that's going to be the same in Ukraine.
yes, it happened in Iraq as well, from depleted uranium. Now, something that I wanted to get to is a new story that actually came out on, from Reuters. And before we go there, for those of you who are just tuning in, you're listening to And So It Flows, your only show for H2O here at 89.7 WTBR-FM, Pittsfield Community Radio, bringing you the culture of water around the world. Having a conversation with friend of show, Captain Matthew Hoh, and a little bit about, Matthew Hoh is an associate director of the Eisenhower Media Network, a former Marine Corps captain, an Afghanistan State Department officer, disabled Iraq War veteran, and senior fellow emeritus with the Center for International Policy. We're talking and having a conversation regarding the environmental impacts of the Nord Stream pipeline, getting into some of the details of investigations and what's going on. And Matthew, thanks for coming right back. We've got a story here that came out yesterday from Reuters in Warsaw, suggestions that Ukrainian authorities supported by Poland were behind planning and executing the sabotage attack on Nord Stream gas pipelines in 2022 are groundless, according to the Polish president's aide said on Sunday. Germany's former intelligence chief August Hanning told the White this week, which is publication, he believed that there were agreements between the presidents of Poland and Ukraine to carry out the attack. Do you have any further details on that at all? Do you have any? Did you hear any of that?
Well, what sometimes it's in the little things, right? And this wasn't so little when it happened, but immediately after, like hours after the explosion was detected and the world knew about the destruction of the pipelines, the man who is now the foreign minister for Poland tweeted out a picture of the explosion in the water, this column coming up of the water, the methane gas. And his name's Raslav Sikorski. And Sikorski tweeted out, "Thank you, United States," right? And I mean, the connections were all there. The story that we are told is the story to follow is that the Ukrainians originally had this plan in the spring of 2022. The plan was discovered by Dutch intelligence. The Dutch told the Americans, and the Americans told the Ukrainians to knock it off. Don't do it. The Ukrainians went ahead and did it before. I think that if you look at statements from American officials, such as from the president saying that if, Vladimir Putin does anything in Ukraine, Nord Stream will be finished. He said that shortly before Russia's invasion of Ukraine. I mean, and there's just statements like that throughout the administration. Victoria Nuland, who was the number 2 person in the State Department, said such things. And then, as I talked to, it's been the history of the last decade, this type of tension, this aggression towards one another. One of the things you have to consider as well is the value, who benefits from this. And
that's actually a great question,
right?
So who's the ultimate recipient of any benefits of the cutoff of natural gas,
right? And this traces back, Leslie, to fracking, right? So under the Obama administration, we start fracking everywhere. And what are you going to do with all that gas that you're producing? You got to sell it someplace. And so Western Europe, and Western Europe is a huge gas market, both for residential and commercial purposes. This is what fuels the industry, and particularly in Germany. And this is why when this occurs, this inflation is so devastating to Europe in the last couple of years. But, so who benefits? Well, of course, the United States benefits. So you blow up the Nord Stream pipeline, and now who is the largest exporter of liquid natural gas to Central and Western Europe? It's the United States. Who's now the largest liquid natural gas exporter in the world? It's the United States. And there's an interesting thing about this. If people remember back in 2012, when Mitt Romney and Barack Obama debated one another, And Barack Obama ridiculed Mitt Romney, and he said, because Romney said Russia is our main adversary, and Barack Obama basically said, hey Mitt, 20th century's calling, the Cold War ended 20 years ago. Russia's not our enemy. And then you see a change in the Obama administration. And what's driving that change? One of many things that's driving it is we've got all this frack gas. And so what starts happening in 2013 is you start seeing all these permits being submitted to the Department of Energy, Department of Commerce, asking for permission to either build new liquid natural gas export facilities or expand the existing ones. And of course, the market was Western Europe. So you start to understand that, okay, not only about hurting Russia, it's about our gain as well. And so you can understand this relationship, this nexus that exists of who benefits from destroying this pipeline very clearly. And you could see one of the people say there are no victors in the Ukraine war. And I'll argue that, well, there's one at least, the United States, because it is now the lead exporter of liquid natural gas in the world, the lead exporter of liquid natural gas to Western Europe, primarily because of the destruction of the Nord Stream pipeline.
Yeah, it's like blowing up every Domino's pizza in order to get your Pizza Hut there. And, it's a little silly and not exactly the most efficient way of conducting business, especially when you're talking about such pollution and such impact to the environment. Plus, the ongoing need for creating war and pestilence around the world. I keep on saying to folks, if we could act as a human species a little less like guppies or locusts and a little more like butterflies, we might actually stand a chance, of actually moving to some level of evolution. And I think part of it is going through the hard spots as well as like looking for opportunities, which is something I wanted to get to at for the rest of your time here. And for those of you who are just tuning in, you're listening to And So It Flows, your only show for H2O, here at 89.7 WTBR-FM here, Pittsfield Community Radio, bringing you water culture around the world, here with friend of show Matthew Hoh, former State Department official, former U.S. Marine captain, worked in both Afghanistan and in Iraq. He's joining us today. We're having this discussion about the Nord Stream pipeline and some other things I want to talk to you. Obviously, we could focus on all these things regarding what's not working. What are you looking to build with the Eisenhower Media Network, with the your work around creating a new foreign policy? What is it that you're looking to build? Let's go full Bucky Fuller on people.
Yeah, it's this idea of allowing people to understand the true costs and consequences of war. From perspectives, and with Eisenhower Media Network, what we do is we bring in veterans, usually senior military officers, former national security officials, who will speak in opposition to the current policies, coming from a place of experience. So this idea that we have men and women who are speaking out against these policies, and they have a background that gives them the bona fides to do so. They also are men and women who are not touched by the military-industrial complex. There has been study after study. Nearly every think tank in Washington, D.C. takes money from the weapons contractors, or they are funded directly by the Pentagon and the State Department and National Security Council. If you go and you turn on CNN or MSNBC, or if you read the New York Times or the Washington Post, the experts that are cited on these wars and on military affairs almost always are on the payroll of the weapons industry, and have a connection still to the Pentagon, almost always. Whether it's that you're talking about the Iraq War, whether you're talking about the Afghan War, the war that was in Syria, the Ukraine War, it's about 90% of those who speak about the war in major corporate media have ties to the defense industry. So we're trying to...
No way. They're like they go on as a consultant on MSNBC or something. but they're making buck on the other side.
Oh, it's incredibly egregious. The conflict of interest is just, mind-blowing. I mean, you literally have had people go on to, say, CNN and argue that we need to send more weapons to Ukraine. And then when they're asked, what kind of weapons should we send, they literally say the weapon systems that the people who pay them make. So you had the famous example is I'm blanking on his name, but goes on CNN and he says we need to send more Javelin missiles, and he's the who he works through is funded by the producer of those Javelin missiles, right? I mean, so the conflict of interest is just really overwhelming here.
I think they should go on to the MSNBC show and MSNBC shows, CNN shows with NASCAR jackets. They really funded by the big pharma. They need to have like a big CVS logo, or they need to have like some kind of logo of Pfizer, and at least there'll be some transparency. And folks who are doing it for making their bucks off this, at least they should go on with General Dynamics or perhaps Raytheon on their NASCAR jackets, and at least there'll be some transparency. Who's paying for this. And I think that's part of the egregious, underwhelming transparency for getting these folks on the mainstream media. We got about 2 minutes left. So thanks for joining the show again. We're speaking with Matthew Hoh. He's a former State Department official, former Marine, works with the Eisenhower Media Network, working very hard to create a new foreign policy that promotes peace and tranquility around the world, which will allow humanity to thrive and the world to thrive. How can people find out more? How can they reach out to you? What do they do?
Sure, just search for Eisenhower Media Network. It'll come up, and you can follow me on Substack at Matthew Hoh, last name spelled H-O-H, or you can follow me on Twitter at Matthew P. Hoh, P as in Patrick, and again, last name spelled H-O-H. And yeah, I appreciate you having me here, Leslie. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thanks for being with us. I appreciate your time and your effort, and take care of yourself, and peace be with you.
All right, thank you.
Peace. All right, be well.
Thanks, Leslie.
You're listening to And So It Flows, your only show for H2O. That was Matthew Hoh, which rhymes with show and H2O. Very cool. Very, very, very cool. Thanks again, Matthew, for being with us. And thanks for being friend of show. A little bit of a poem for you. Let's see. This by Wendell Berry. The Peace of Wild Things. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things, who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come with the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light for a time. I rest with the grace of the world, and I am free. Peace of Wild Things. Thanks, Wendell Berry, for creating that. We got a little bit more music coming your way, and this is by Jack Johnson. Drink the water.
Drink the water, drink it down. This time I know I'm bound to spit it back up. I didn't want this, salty substitute. Just not going to do, I need some air. If I'm going to live through this experience, reminds me of a clock that just won't tick. I wanna wake up from this a concussion, but my dream is just not done. I'm late again. It's just one of those bad days. Look outside and be careful what you ride. You just might find that you're out of time to swim ashore. If I drift long enough, I'll be dive in the ocean and it sink like a stone. And you say it's time to swim ashore. If I drift long enough, I'll be home. Hold on, if you can, you're gonna sink faster than you can imagine. So just hold on, if you can, you're gonna sink faster than you can imagine. So it's just time to swim ashore. If I drift long enough,
you're listening to And So It Flows, your only show for H2O. That was Jack Johnson, Drink the Water, off the Don't Drink the Kool-Aid album. No, just kidding. That was the Brush Fire Fairy Tale album. Super psyched to have been with you this week. In a couple of weeks, we're bringing on Mary Beth Mitz, independent, running for State House Rep, District 3. So we're going to have some of that coming up in a couple of weeks. Just a little FYI, Lay has actually not been part... Oh, we got music playing in the background. Oh, too bad. Going to turn that baby off. Lay, I forgot her last name, also running, has been avoiding our request for an interview, and I wonder why. You may want to ask her. If you see a Lay sign and you see Lay, ask her about water, and perhaps she should come on the show. But everyone else has. Mary Beth Mitz will be with us in a couple of weeks. Super psyched to have been with you this week. And So It Flows, your only show for H2O.
Sparkling water, lemon, osmosis, carbonated, filtered, distilled. See? In the abundance of water, the fool will get thirsty.